My guest today is Gina Carr, and she's on a mission to help millions of people live healthier, happier lives. After losing over 50 pounds and learning how to keep it off effortlessly, she teaches baby boomers how to lose weight amazingly fast and keep it off forever. She earned her MBA at the Harvard Business School and a degree in industrial engineering at Georgia Tech, and she is the author of Clout Matters: How to Engage Customers, Boost Your Digital Influence, and Raise Your Clout Score for Success, which was published by McGraw-Hill. So quite a change from doing that to being on this mission to teach people how to live healthier, happier lives. So welcome, Gina.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Gail.
Well, what do they say? If diets work, there wouldn't be any diets because we'd all be thin. So you've got a pretty big mission that you've embarked on, and I know you were excited about losing the weight. So how did all of this come to be?
Well, gosh, I've struggled with my weight as far back as I can remember. I mean, all the way back to high school, where I always felt like I was, the biggest person, the fattest person. And then certainly over the last decade or so, I had ballooned up to quite, well, to quite a huge number, getting into that obese range, which is very unhealthy. And so I over the last couple of years, though, I dramatically changed my diet, the way that I ate, the way that I thought about food, and I have lost the weight. And I know for the first time in my life, I just don't have to worry about my weight again. You mentioned that people shouldn't need to worry about diets, and I think that's totally true. When you're eating right, you don't have to diet. You really just don't even have to be concerned. Your body's gonna tell you what it needs, and if you're eating the right kind of foods, your body's going to process those foods well.
But I've known you for a very long time, Gina, and I have to tell you, I cannot remember you being overweight. Now, maybe you hid it well, but I don't remember you being overweight. So how did you lose more than 50 pounds?
Well, it's kind of you to say that. I am on the tall side. I'm about 5'8". I was 5'8". I think I'm about 5'7" now. I've shrunk a bit, but because of that and proper clothes, I did know how to hide it pretty well. But the biggest way that I've lost this weight and keep it off effortlessly is I totally switched to a whole food plant-based diet. What some people would call a vegan diet. I call a vegan diet for myself, but the truth is you can be vegan. You can be whole food plant-based, but not be vegan. And so that means that you may eat whole food plant-based, but you don't pay attention to the clothing that you wear or the entertainment that you take in. So things like that, which a stricter vegan would be consumed with, or, not consumed with, but focused on those issues as well. So a whole food plant-based diet. And so that means that I eat beans, nuts, fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And that's a ton of food. It's so much food. It's so much variety, so much healthy variety of foods. And I just have absolutely plenty to eat, plenty of nutrition, plenty of protein. People say, where do you get your protein? And the answer is there's protein in all foods. There's protein in watermelon, protein in apples. And the truth is that even vegans and vegetarians are getting over 70% more of the daily requirement for protein on average.
But now you mentioned some other things before. You mentioned what you listen to, you mentioned what you wear. How does that all fit into that? That didn't even come to my mind. So what are you talking about there?
Well, listening to is partially listening to what's going on in your head. And so I've learned to meditate more, so to calm the voices in my head, to reduce my anxiety, and to tell myself that when I hear myself saying, "Oh, you're hungry," instead of saying, "Oh, well, go get something to eat," I now tell myself, "Oh, I'm hungry. That's good," because my body is processing the junk that's in the body. It's kind of like a factory. When the factory's working full time and they're constantly in production mode, there's no time for that downtime of going back behind yourself and cleaning and replenishing the stock and that sort of thing, which when your body gets slightly into hunger mode, it does those things. Now, I'm not advocating going into severe hunger mode, but slight hunger mode for most of us, that would be a very healthy thing because most of us are way over, we've done way too much in the terms of overeating. And we're eating from the moment we get up in the morning till the time we go to bed with occasional breaks in between to sleep and, to maybe work and do a few other things. But a lot of us are just eating way too much. So I advocate a thing called intermittent fasting. And I limit myself generally, most days, to eating in a 5 to 7 hour window. So I don't start eating first thing in the morning and I don't eat right up until I go to bed. I have several hours there that my body is able to process and to go in and pull out some of the fat and the toxins and the stuff that's no longer needed and flush that through my system.
Wow. So do you exercise? I mean, where does exercise fall into all of this?
Well, exercise is important, but it's not as important as I used to think. I'm one of those who used to go to the gym for an hour or two a day, and I would make sure I sweated really hard, and I was, doing weights or doing classes and those sorts of things. I do think that exercise is important, but whereas I used to give it a sort of a 50-50 weighting with what I would eat, I now believe that it's more 80 to 90% what you eat and only 10 to 20% is exercise. And part of the way that I've come up with that is my own personal experience. For the first 20 to 30 pounds, I was doing that pretty hard exercise of going to the gym and sweating and, really hardcore aerobics. But the last 20 pounds, I really have been focused just on light walking, light movement, walking, yoga. And I don't sweat every day. That may be good for people, but I don't think it's necessary. And another reason that I think it's not necessary is because when you study what the people in the areas called the blue zones do, the blue zones are places where people regularly live to be over 100 years old, and they're in pretty good health. They don't have the conditions that we have here in the United States, such as the heart disease and the cancers and the Alzheimer's and the Parkinson's, those sorts of chronic debilitating conditions. But they do have movement. So they don't exercise like we do in terms of they don't go jogging, they don't go to a gym. It's just a natural part of what they do is they move, they go to the store, they have some movement with whatever employment they're doing, whatever it is they're doing with their families. And so they don't have this structured exercise time. It's just regular movement. So I try to emulate that in my daily activities with yoga and with just walking.
Well, it's interesting because it's true. I mean, we drive everywhere, and especially, but in some cities, you almost have to drive everywhere rather than, walk just the way the layout is. But my definition has always been diet is for pounds and exercise is for inches. So I never really thought of exercising as a way to lose weight. I did think it shifted your body because of exercises that you do. And of course, it's good for your bones and it's good to stretch and it's good to be flexible and all of those things. But it was always for me, what you put in your mouth is really what is reflected on the scale. So I've always believed that. But I would think, what is it like for you to go out to eat?
Well, it's actually quite simple. A lot of my friends know that I'm vegan, and so they'll say, "Oh my gosh, I don't even know of a vegan restaurant. Where on earth can we go?" And so, I mean, it's just become kind of funny to me now because I know after doing this, I'm in my third year of being vegan and literally traveling all over the world, that I can eat anywhere. I mean, try to tell me of a restaurant that doesn't have vegetables, a restaurant that doesn't even if it's French fries. I mean, that's not a healthy vegetable, but at least it's vegetables. Tell me of a restaurant that generally isn't going to have some kind of fruit or some kind of bread. So I'm able to eat all over the world And when I go to a place that I don't speak the language, I will take an index card, a simple index card, and I just write out instructions for my dietary preferences. And all of your folks can do this also. I will say no animal products. And for some people, they need a clarification. Oh, does that mean fish? Yes, that means fish. Does that mean eggs? Yes, that means eggs. So no eggs, no fish, no chicken, none of that. And I just have it written out in English. And then on the flip side, I'll have it written out in whatever language of the country that I'm going to. And I either get a friend to help me with that, like I'll ask a friend through Facebook to write it out for me, and then I just copy it, or I'll use Google Translate, and I just am able to write out, do the spelling and write it out from that. So I found that to be a really handy tool to help me navigate the restaurants around the world. And then just, let's say that what's more typical, of course, is going to be a restaurant in your native tongue where that's not such a big issue. But you still may be concerned about asking the waiter and feeling like you're being a burden or a bother. And I'm over that now. I don't feel that way. But if people do have concerns like that, they can still take that sort of a card in and just hand it to a waiter, or they can call in advance and talk to a manager. Certainly, you can get online for many restaurants today, and you can look to see what options are going to be helpful to you and going to meet your dietary preferences. And I'm just able to find vegan food, whole food, plant-based food anywhere, and especially side items. So what typically are side items, I can order the broccoli, the spinach, the corn, the beans, those sorts of things. And I just ask them if they, rather than prepare them in butter, please use olive oil or just use water.
It's interesting because I have a friend of mine who is a raw food person. And of course, I am not a meat person per se. I actually don't eat meat at home only because I don't cook. So when I go to like a Whole Foods or something like that, I get prepared foods, and very rarely, is it meat. So when I go out to eat, I will very often order meat because I just don't eat it any other time. And it's amazing. I mean, she knows me. She says, "Oh, Gail, you're just the opposite of everything I am." And of course, when we go to a restaurant, she'll pick out some restaurants that really are not my cup of tea. But usually I can figure out something to eat as well. But she does eat a really raw food diet, and it's amazing. She'll go and she'll ask the restaurant, "Wait, can you prepare this and this, or one from this and one from that?" And it's amazing how well it works out. Plus, today, I do not think I've been to a restaurant, a real restaurant that doesn't have a vegetarian dish. I mean, everybody offers that today. And my daughter's vegetarian, my granddaughter's vegetarian. So it's really interesting how time has changed. But now, do you make a difference? What is the difference saying whole food and plant-based?
Well, the difference is that there are a lot of processed foods that are plant-based. For example, people could be plant-based and eat potato chips and Oreos all day long, and that's not terribly healthy. And they're not going to get the health benefits that I'm going to get because I eat more whole foods. But it's interesting you asked that question because I can see from the balcony of my home, looking out the window, a Whole Foods. And honestly, when I moved here for the first couple of years, I kept thinking that myself, like, aren't all foods whole foods? I mean, like, I'm not buying a half of a food, I'm buying the whole food. But it's taken me years to figure out what whole foods were. And so whole food generally is, the less processed that it is. So in terms of what some of the doctors that I follow recommend is, red light, green light, and yellow light foods. So a green light food would be more like your friend, plant raw and closer to raw. And even if it's cooked, for many foods, if it's just lightly cooked, like tomatoes are said to be healthier if they're cooked than if they're not cooked. But still, I say only cook them very lightly, because the healthiest foods on the planet are actually sprouts, because they're living foods. So the closer you can get back to that original energy of the food, the original state when it's growing, the better you can do. And you can do sprouts right in your own kitchen. It's not something special that you have to grow on a garden or a balcony. You can just look up sprouting